So welcome everyone here. It's great to have you all here for our coastal resilience meeting. And today's meeting is hopefully a chance for us to be able to discuss the NCOS coastal the coastal resilience funding opportunity that NOAA currently has available. And just in case, so I know we sent out in the invitation to this a quick 20-25 minute introduction that was put together by the program managers for this funding opportunity. And so hopefully you had a chance to be able to take a look at that. But if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I just wanted to really quickly go over that this is a sea level rise specific funding opportunity. There's a portion of it that is based specifically here in Alaska with the potential to fund 1 to 2 projects a year for 2 to 4 years at the rate of 200 to 500,000 per year. And the focus is on rural coastal um, communities in Western Alaska. And really specifically, they're looking for interdisciplinary projects that will do kind of three things. One, leveraging existing and anticipated geospatial data sets like the LiDAR and VDATUM to advance modeling approaches. One is really to move forward and expand scenario-based modeling to include climate impacts and quantify some coastal vulnerabilities. And one is to enable informed planning and management actions that can reduce the impacts of sea level rise and storm risk and those kinds of things. And we were able to have Sarah Pease, I hope I got your name right, with us today from that program, who's one of the program managers for this particular project. And we thought what we'd first do is kind of open it up if there are questions that people have regarding this funding opportunity. We wanted to have Sarah sort of be available to answer some of those questions. And so that'll be kind of the first portion of our discussion here. And then we wanted to kind of move forward into a more open discussion about about some project ideas, opportunities that might be out there, maybe knowledge of data sets that could be valuable, any of those kinds of things that might help us be able to, really have a response to this funding opportunity that would allow Western Alaska to get a really good picture of what's going on and kind of move us forward in that science effort. So with that, I'll ask Sarah to come on, and I'll leave it open. Sarah, if there's anything that I got wrong, please correct me. I, I was very much paraphrasing what was said, so please correct me on anything that I got wrong there, or expand on anything you'd like, and then I'll let you go ahead and open it up for any questions that people might have. So I will go ahead and turn it over now, and yeah, we'll go from there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Taze. Good to see you all today. My name's Sarah Pease. I'm a fairly new program manager for the Effective Sea Level Rise program at NCOS in NOAA, and I'm really happy to be here today. Previously, I was a NOAA Marine Policy Fellow with the Canals Fellowship Program in Senator Murkowski's office, so I'm fairly familiar with Alaska and IARPC, and I'm really happy to be here today. Taze covered the priorities really well. I have slides, but they're the same slides that are in the presentation that was shared. So I think I'm going to pass on sharing them again, but they are posted on our website, which I will share in the chat right now. And on our website, you can find a link to the notice of funding opportunity, the webinar that was given that has a recorded presentation, as well as a question and answer document that I also highly recommend that you look at. We've been taking all of the questions that we've received so far and been providing answers to those and posting them so that everyone has access to that information as well. So just to kind of reiterate here, the Notice of Funding Opportunity has two main focus areas this year: the general coastal resilience area, which technically there could also be proposals from the region that would fit that as well. And then also the specific Alaska Regional Coastal Resilience Focus Area, which does focus specifically on rural coastal communities in Western Alaska. The three priorities that Taze went over, the NOFO stipulates that each proposal needs to address 2 out of those 3 priorities. So I wanted to highlight that. And then I wanted to also highlight that we are looking for proposals that are highly integrative and collaborative, and that demonstrate continuous engagement with end users and stakeholders. Specifically for that Alaska Regional Coastal Resilience Focus Area, there's priority that will be given to teams with a demonstrated record of collaboration in the region and familiarity with existing geospatial data sets. And then I also wanted to highlight that the letters of intent deadline is November 13th. So if this is a funding opportunity that you think you have interest in, please ensure that you get a letter of intent into our email, ncost.grant.awards@noaa.gov by that deadline. If you don't get a letter of intent in, we cannot review a full proposal. So make sure you get a letter of intent into us. And then just a reminder that the full proposal deadline is January 24th. And with that, I think I'm happy to take questions from anybody.
Thanks, Sarah. So I know that there's quite a series of frequently asked questions that were available on the site there. But I did have a couple questions for you just for clarifying. And one of them was that just to make sure that we're all clear, they can include the PIs can be anyone really from anywhere. But the goal is to make sure that it's all more or less interdisciplinary. And so to that end, with the sort of end users, we're talking about the people in the coastal villages, and we're talking about the tribal, the tribes, the tribal corporations, all of that, correct?
Yeah, so coastal decision makers is kind of the phrasing that's used in the NOFO. So anybody that falls into that category for those rural Alaskan coastal communities as coastal decision makers.
Great. And then a second question, just again, one for clarification, is really kind of more kind of running down the lines of government entities can also be partners or PIs on this as well. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, so we do fund other government entities as the lead PI. It just means that there would need to be an interagency agreement, which can take a little bit longer, but we absolutely do fund projects that have other agencies as the lead PI.
Excellent. So we have a couple questions that are coming in. How can communities prepare for adverse events by receiving information from this process?
That is a great question. I think that that's something that, you know, we would like to see the researchers address in their proposal. I think that's a broader, more philosophical discussion than I can really fully answer or fully give a justified answer for in my role as program manager.
So it's effectively something that you would expect to see in the full proposal that comes forward.
I think it's something that needs to be in the full proposal, and I also would say that, selected projects, once it's a selected project, the program managers can participate and assist in forming MTAGs, which I'm blanking on what that stands for, but essentially it's like an advisory group that includes end users with the scientists. So selected projects will receive additional support at that time to strengthen and form new connections with additional end users. But a typical competitive proposal should also demonstrate some pre-existing connections with community and end users.
Wonderful. Thanks. And can you please speak a little more to how tribes fit within your framework here?
Yeah, so we worked really hard on the NOFO to include a definition that was as inclusive as we could possibly try to be, and I hope we did well. But we recognize all the different tribal entities, government entities, consortia, all of the different pieces, and all of those we would like to see incorporated in the appropriate manner. So, we can have co-PIs, PIs that are part of those different tribal entities, or they can be the coastal decision makers, they can be the end users, they can be the stakeholders. It's really, limitless how they can fit into that equation. It depends on what expertise is being provided and where, is it an end user? Is it the science? Is it the social science, like local knowledge? What is the piece that's being brought in?
Thanks. Another question, how will criteria be built to guide decision makers and grantor?
How will criteria be built? I may have to come back to that one. I don't know. Could you clarify that question a little bit more for me?
Yeah, Rosemary, are you willing to come on and kind of explain a little bit more about your question, please?
Yes, there is so much that's happening with the various changes that are happening in so many different communities. And there's a reaction with grant opportunities for climate change, sea level rise, and these different changes that are occurring. With the research that's being done, is there going to be a decision-making criteria that can help guide decision makers and grantors to prioritize decisions of projects and opportunities?
Thanks, Rosemary. I think that, the focus of the ESLR funding opportunity is the science to guide decision making. So, I think that type of criteria building is something that we would love to see our teams do. It's not necessarily a requirement of this funding opportunity, but I think that's a great point that you bring up and an important piece of the process of kind of taking science and making it actually usable and useful for these communities. So I don't know that that's specifically required, but I think that's an important piece.
Claire, could you speak a little more to the evaluation criteria that you all have for including decision makers in this call?
Sure. So our evaluation criteria should be listed in the NOFO.
So for example, you brought up the management transition advisory groups.
Mhm.
So the prospective end users. Um, so are how what would a successful to what extent would a successful proposal incorporate those inherently in their team, I guess is my question.
I mean, that varies from project to project. I do want to emphasize that you do not have to have that M tag formed in advance of finishing a full proposal. Many of the projects that we fund have ideas for who they want in an M tag, but they don't have it necessarily finished out. That's something that can be done post award. So it's really up to the people writing proposals to include as much information as they think is relevant for the NOFO, but it's not required that it be fully filled out. That is something that we do assist with and can further flesh out with the awarded teams after the fact.
Thanks. We have a couple more questions and comments that are that are coming in. Let's see here. We have, and I think you addressed this one, the tribal consultation aspects being different than tribes as community interest or stakeholders. So I think you talked a little bit about that already. But there's another question here on the independent review panels. Will you have rural Alaskans included as experts, which are noted in step 2?
We have not selected panelists at this time. I can't comment on that. However, like we do our best to ensure that we have the relevant experts for our calls. But I really appreciate that question.
Okay, and specifically, Stacy, if you have any more comment to the question that I think was answered, you're welcome to come on and elaborate a little more, but I think part of that was answered already.
Thank you. Related to the first question on tribal engagement, it just in the response, I wasn't sure if talking about tribes and then corporations and then community members, if they were all sort of in the same category for NOAA, or if you guys considered tribes in a consultation sense, and then they could also appear in other areas as PIs or project partners or whatever. So I just wanted to confirm that that is what was meant. Tribes as a government, right? Separate from the corporation, which is a private entity.
Yeah, I understand your question. And yes, we are following the tribal consultation guidelines that NOAA has released.
Are there any other questions that people have that you'd like to ask of Sarah?
This is Rosemary. Is there a process in which you're going to look at the variety of projects that are going to be considered, where you look at things that are on the coast and things that are in the intertidal area and things that are going to go further upstream because of the changes that are happening with the sea level rise, so that we can get a variety of projects that look at various issues within those ranges?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. Yeah, so what we do is, we will read the LOIs, and there will be a selection of panelists to review the full proposals. And then the proposals will be ranked by those expert panelists. And then all of the proposals afterwards, after they've been ranked, are ranked based on the priorities. And they're the same priorities across all of NOAA. Those priorities are meant to ensure that there is a diversity of projects that are funded. So that covers things like geographic diversity, as well as type of project and space, like you're alluding to as well. So yes, that's a consideration in the selection process.
And
Thank you.
a follow-up to that question is, how far inland is coastal? Just because I know we have a lot of villages that are right on some pretty large rivers that are, fairly coastal, but is there a limit, or is it a kind of a case? And I say this knowing full well that NOAA very specifically said we, would definitely try and weight regional approaches over very localized approaches, but how far inland is coastal?
I think that's a great question, especially for Alaska. I don't like, we have not been trying to draw that line. We're looking forward to seeing what proposals we get. I think, there's an understanding that sea level rise and inundation can have pretty far reaching impacts inland. So that's part of our understanding of these issues as well. And would like to see what we get for proposals.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple other questions. Are the decision makers community leaders, not people from state, federal, and local government? Or are they any and all potential decision makers?
There, any and all, that's a broad term used for our general coastal resilience call as well. So that's inclusive of federal, state, regional, local, tribal, community level decision makers.
Okay. And then another question, which I've seen that FAQ, so I'm not sure you're able to answer this one, but I will ask it. What are the top 3 data sets or projects that should be included in the proposals?
Yes, that's one that I cannot specifically coach on or provide that info, but we did post, and I'll make sure that it is up on our website, a updated answer to a similar question. So please check our website and read the Q&A that is on there, and that's what we can provide.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is a good point of discussion that we can have on this call, because there are quite a few data sets that are out there, and one of the priority areas is leveraging the existed and anticipated geospatial data sets that are going to be out there. So there are quite a few data sets, and I think the goal, and maybe something that we can discuss, is what data sets might we want to be thinking about, and what are out there that could really be used to start thinking about advancing some of these modeling efforts and some of the scenarios that are currently existing for climate impacts. But yeah, we're just going to open it up. Are there other questions that people have? And if you don't want to type them in, you are welcome to unmute yourself and come on and ask Sarah any questions that you'd like. And I'll leave it open for a minute or so.
This is Rosemary again. Is there going to be a process in leveraging the data sets that could be contributed to some of this additional research, prioritizing that? Communities have real life, health, and safety issues that have rapidly arose with the changes that have happened in these last years and trying to come up with a plan of action and staggering of activities is important. Is that something that may happen with this?
Thanks, Rosemary. I think you asked if there's going to be leveraging of this data set and staggering in order to better use what comes out of these projects. Is that right?
It's about we're going to have trouble getting some of these data sets, but if we can improve the way that we consider that what we're going after and when we're going after it, and consider the life, health, and safety of communities in those discussions, I think it can be beneficial. And it's important for communities because we're going to have a lot of issues that rapidly arise, and how to stagger projects in relation to information that we can glean from this process.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. Again, and I think, you know, I think that's something that meets our priorities for the LOI or for the NOFO is also, you know, we would like to see projects that are useful immediately to people. So projects that are going to offer information that can be used quickly, that's good.
Other questions that anyone would like to ask? Okay, well, it sounds like you're going to be off the hot seat for now, Sarah. But as was noted earlier, oh wait, hold on, I'm sorry. There is one other question that's come in. And that is, earlier you mentioned preferring regional over single community. Can you share a little more about that?
Sure. So typically with our funding, we look for projects that they can be performed at a local scale, but we're looking for the end products or data to produce something that could be useful somewhere else too. So it's not necessarily that the project can't focus on one very specific place, but it needs to be clear how that information will be transferable afterwards. We're not we're not trying to fund something where the data can only be used in one community. That has less value to us than something that will be able to be transferred to multiple communities and help additional communities in the future. Whereas a regional project has a larger scale to start with and maybe is comparing multiple communities that have different situations, if that makes sense.
And I'll leave it open for just another minute if anyone has any other questions they think of. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and now I'm gonna let you off the hot seat, Sarah. But on behalf of all of us on the Costa Rosalians team and several and everyone who's showed up here, we just want to say thank you. We really appreciate you coming and joining the call for this particular project, and yeah, thank you for answering all the questions. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at that 25-minute ESLR federal funding opportunity presentation that was given, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that Meredith put into the chat a link to that. as well as the link to the grant opportunity. So please, please go take a look at that. I think we covered a lot of it already, but if there's other questions that are there, there's also a frequently asked questions list that's on that same page that you can go into that will kind of help clarify a handful of things. And then, of course, always make sure you go in and take a look at the full grant opportunity. And I know there was one other question. I think it's not as relevant right now, but I know there was a question about the final application, and there was a whole list of different things that were necessary on the final application. And if it's a federal entity, there's several of those documents that may not be relevant for federal entities. And so I think there was a question about how they go about applying for that. So if you want to tackle that right now, that'd be great. Otherwise, we can always pull you on later. And if we do have one of those that's coming out, we can grab you later too.
Yeah, I will look for that in the chat and respond to it. And any responses that I gave today, we will also type those up and add them to the Q&A. So again, check out the Q&A. And I just wanted to say thank you for your patience with me. I'm a new program manager. And not only that, but if you have additional questions or if you want to run ideas by the program managers, please reach out to us. I will put my email in the chat. We are happy to hear your ideas and provide what info we can, although we cannot coach. And yes, thank you for having me today. And that's all.
Awesome. Well, you're welcome to stay or go. I think we're going to try and chat a little bit about some of the potential opportunities that are out there and some of the discussions. And so, by all means, feel free to hang out. But thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. All right, jumping into some of the other things that have come up. We did get a question about existing geospatial data sets. So one of the things that was in that FAQ about geospatial data sets, there's not one specific geospatial data set that is necessarily better than another, as long as they're really specifically trying to focus on the three kind of key questions that were identified in the notice of funding opportunity. And there are some existing data sets that would probably be pretty relevant to know about. There is, through the USGS 3DEP program, there is existing LiDAR. There is I think they were supposed to get funded in 2023, and then the LiDAR is supposed to be flown in 2024. That covers basically from Nome all through Norton Sound and kind of halfway through the YK Delta. So there's quite a bit of coastal LiDAR information that's going to be available there. The Alaska State DGGS has a bunch of information that they've been collecting relative to coastal hazards for communities all throughout Western Alaska. And then there's some structure for motion information as well, in terms of kind of geospatial data sets that are out there. And Christina put in the information on the USGS LiDAR project that will be collected. There's some localized LiDAR in some of the villages that's out there, and you can find that on the, there's a link to the NOAA, I think it's Sea Viewer page, that has information there. The National Park Service collected structure for motion information. I'm not sure if it's available yet, but it should be available or anticipated. That goes along from the Seward Peninsula down and around and through most of Norton Sound. So there's a lot of that kind of information that is out and available, and I think it would be just relevant to the projects for that kind of direct work. But also, it's worth thinking about some of the satellite data information that's geospatial information that's available from the Alaska satellite facility. And so there's definitely options and availability of satellite data collection that has been collected through polar orbiting satellites that are pretty all over Western Alaska. And so I think there's opportunities that are there. And I know there's other geospatial data sets, but those are some that come to mind. But I'm happy to kind of turn it over and let people kind of think about what are issues that might be really relevant and appropriate, and things that people might want to discuss. So I'm comfortable with a little bit of silence too, so as you think about what's there. But if you have something that you want to say, by all means, go ahead and come on and unmute yourself, and we'll just go ahead and start having a discussion here. And I will mute myself now.
I think you're trying to speak, but you're muted.
Thank you. Jose, maybe you could read my mind, but what I was saying was, could you specify the three sort of focus areas of the proposal that were listed in the FOA for those of us who didn't really do our homework so well?
Yeah, no problem. So going back to those three things, the first one was we wanted to leverage existing and anticipated, so even if they're not here yet, anticipated geospatial data sets to advance modeling approaches. And so there's an element to it that should involve modeling very specific to the coast and sea level rise, storm surge, that kind of thing. Another one is advance and expand scenario-based modeling to include climate impacts and quantify coastal vulnerabilities. And I think there's kind of a pretty broad range of things that could fit into that. And then enable informed planning and management actions that reduce sea level rise and storm related risks. And that's paraphrasing what's actually in the NOFO. So I just want to clarify that that's paraphrased.
So it's really the third one that really ties into the nature-based solutions, right? Because the first two really don't. Is that a fair reading?
Correct. Yeah. Nature-based solutions. Actually, in Alaska, if there are, it can relate in Alaska to gray structures, something like that. Anyway, it can relate to relocation. It can relate to. There's a whole bunch of different things that it can relate to in regards to planning and management. And so, I think that whatever projects move forward are definitely going to need to be able to kind of address how this is going to A, get information to communities, B, communities should probably be involved in the projects as a whole. Not probably, they should be. And then management actions, like there's any of a number of different management actions that could potentially be out there, and how that, but thinking about modeling and the future.
This is Rosemary. I have a lot of concerns around modeling in communities, limited access to some of the data sets, and ways that assessments of reactions to data can really affect communities, or there can be immediate change because of the sea level rise that can be real contributing. One thing that comes to mind is because of the industrial activity, there's hydrology studies and things that are being done associated with that. But our communities also are interacting in these areas as they become more industrialized. and our traverses around the activities and how we can glimmer immediacy of change. There's an area nearby here where we dock boats when we're getting onto the hard pack road, and being able to work with some of the discussions around our local interpretations of rapid changes with wave actions in vessel traffic, even the smaller vessels that go in between some of these areas can react with safety issues in traveling in these areas where you anticipate things are going to go as they've always done for generations, but with the rapid of change, there's some immediacy of actions that are happening. But when you don't get the appropriateness of the data sets to allow communities to get those views, or there's other interest to approve projects nearby, there's really a leveling of the playfield that needs to occur with these discussions.
Rosemary,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious. One thing that we've done in the past is we've produced maps that show sort of expected inundation in the future, so that you can see where the flooding is likely to be, you know, with sea level rise, that kind of thing. Is that a kind of product that would be useful from a community's perspective? Because that's sort of like the result of the modeling, right? One of the things that we get from the modeling is these sort of maps showing where the flooding will be.
That kind of information is helpful, but it's also the layering of information associated with mapping and changes. When we're in a community level trying to get through some of these important questions, we're working with others that stay at the table longer and affect the way research is occurring. And it's really important that we get a process that can help with communities' interpretation, not just get modeling in reports associated with changes that are coming.
So so that means that really there needs to be interaction with the communities, interaction between maybe the people generating the maps and the forecasts and communities members who are sort of on the receiving end, so they can provide feedback.
As well as the others that are in these areas of where this research is occurring. So if industry is doing research and there's projects that are occurring and their employees are traversing through this area where data sets are occurring, and if there's information that is being generated like our traditional knowledge, noting that wave patterns were changing in this area, it was affecting us when we go into boat to dock our boats, as well as if we're nearby in the area with the changes that are happening, that we get those communications out of the process. For some of them, having an accident around these wave actions, that's not a data set they want to increase their insurance rates. But interpreting why some of these actions are happening and timing of actions and reactions around the waves that are happening are important to discuss so that we prevent some of the reactions that are happening. Like if we get into some of these smaller areas with boats and then we have other boats that are coming into these areas, it affects the wave actions when we're deepening the water that is there. And it can cause adverse events, flooding of a boat unexpectedly, because you don't usually see waves that react in that way. But because there's so much changes to how usage on the water is occurring, it affects that. Just some of my thoughts in this process. I know we were trying to communicate within the community, and then there was an event in which we saw some reaction, but it's trying to get that communications out of the research process and into the community.
Well, that's really important feedback. Because certainly, if, for example, someone or industry is deepening navigational channels, so that they can, have more commerce, that type of activity could affect the coast and could, increase vulnerability of coastal communities. So that is really good feedback. Thank you.
And I saw you put in the chat this note about regional hazard mitigation plans being a baseline for research gaps and priorities. If you can, do you mind speaking a little bit more to those and how many communities have those? How many
They all-
need?
They all have to have them. They don't get federal assistance. They have to, they're subsidies for federal and state funds for hazard mitigation, disaster management, disaster declarations. There is policy in place and they have to fill those requirements or they don't get funding. They can't even declare a disaster unless they have in place every 5 years, there's a cycle for hazard mitigation plans. And there's some communities that don't have the capacity to keep this up. And it is hard for a lot of, especially small communities, to have the resources. Rosemary can probably tell you about that. But that is an essential document that guides everything they do. Everything. It's supposed to guide them about where they're putting their capital improvement funds, where they might be hiring contractors to help them with stuff. That is the place where the researchers need to be. They need to be in the line and help facilitate between that mitigation plan and action. And we are not doing a good job of that.
So what I'm hearing is you're recommending that folks who are looking to put in a proposal use these as perhaps a way to structure their thinking about their plans and ways to interact with communities and particularly which data sets and needs they may be able to contribute to.
Yes, I mean, we're talking even tribal governments, no matter what their size, have to have these in place to get any state or federal funds. So there is a system already out there. We're just not using it well enough to interact with the community. I've been well, Tom can tell you, I work with emergency managers. That's all I do. I mean, that's my main partner in any Arctic community. And so I'm very familiar with how these things are structured. And they have to sit and get community input. It's not just a template that's sort of slapped together. They might hire a consultant to template the format, but the content comes from anybody in any community or the emergency managers. They get public comments. It's the closest thing you can get to a research plan, right? Of what the hazards and risks are in a community from their perspective. That's all. I just wish people would use them more often because it's laid out in them what they need. That's their priorities.
That's a great point. So where are these hazard mitigation plans? I mean, are they
These government websites, Tom. The one in North Slope Borough, I was on the hazard mitigation planning committee this year because they are way behind. Their last one was in 2015. So they've got them up for public comment right now till November 30th through North Slope Borough.
Could you provide the link for that plan?
No, it's on the government website, North Slope Borough, and it's under the risk management page. Yeah, as well as an updated, I think they have their village updated emergency operation plans too. updated on that website. And so most communities will have these on their government website because they want people to be able to use them in their own communities. This year, for the first time, I've actually gotten language in the content, Tom, related to all the collaborators and research that I've been working with them for years. So it's actually listed an occasion where there's somebody related to permafrost collaboration. It doesn't mention them specifically, I don't think. It might, I can't remember, but it mentions that they are working with people who are doing this kind of work now in the community. Which is the first.
Is that the same as the emergency preparedness plan?
No. I think Christina, did you just put that in the chat?
Yeah, I did a very quick Google and found the North Slope Borough multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. So I think this is the document that you're referring to.
Yes, and it's public comment till November 30th, right? They have to get that thing in place or they can't declare any disasters and get money. I mean, they can declare them, but there's going to be a challenge. It was the last time because it wasn't in place. Like last October, they didn't comply. They couldn't comply for all that damage that happened last October.
Thank you. I think that's a really great point that you made there, Anne, because there is this sort of disconnect, and if we really want research to be have positive impact, then this is a place where research results can be incorporated, and so that can be
Yeah, and
right.
I don't know if every community has a capital improvement fund, but that's where things are selected to invest in, is from that plan.
Right, well, it sounds like we have a few things we want to make sure we can have people looking up, that's for sure. And thank you so much for bringing that up and making sure that people are aware of those. I know that a few people are starting to kind of drop out and leave, and this was scheduled for an hour, so we have about 2 minutes left. Are there any other comments that people want to bring up before we need to bring this conversation to a close now? And I would also say that we are very much so open to having future conversations about any of these subjects in this coastal resilience team. But yeah, one of our goals is to make sure that everyone is involved at the ground level on putting these projects together, and there are places that we can try that, and we're willing to work with everyone to try and make sure that we have these conversations that can really make things better in the end. So bring to light certain things that might be missed. So thank you, but I will leave it open if anyone else has anything they want to say before we have to bring this meeting to a close.
This is Rosemary. One last thing. As a process goes forward, I've lived with having to react to research and the effects it has on my community and how priorities for life, health, and safety can get left behind. Um, one issue that comes to mind is the process to put particulate matter onto areas to affect the snow melt. And when we put forward so many questions and concerns around particulate matter in human health, yet we have a project approved with particulate matter. This is the type of thing that's important for criteria of assessing. It is very difficult for communities to put forward projects and issues, but reacting to them is worse. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and yeah, this is a great place to bring those concerns up. So thank you. And to everyone who was able to participate, thank you. We look forward to having more conversations and more calls about many coastal issues. So thank you all. It's been a good conversation, and we'll go ahead and close out now.
Thank you for hosting, Taze.
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks, Taze. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye, y'all.